everyone, and welcome to the Plug in Play podcast. I am your host, Henry, and this is our 40th episode of the Plug in Play podcast. Welcome. In this episode, we have a lot to get into. We have some juicy booby games being removed from Steam and itch.io. Those horrible payment processes are taking away all my fun. We have a rough week for Nintendo. Their partner direct was this week. A lot of not so happy people with the partner direct. We're going to get into that, as well as breaking news at this hour. Prices on Nintendo Switch 1 and accessories are due to increase. By the time you hear this, it will be more expensive, but at the time of recording, we're working off the news right now. It's hot, it's fresh off the presses, and of course, we got impressions too. We got the newest, the hottest Donkey Kong Bananza. Banana. You know it if you know it. We have impressions for that, ladies and gentlemen. I've gotten through the game, and I'm going to tell you, is it worth it? Is it worth your time? Is it worth the conversation that's been about it the past few weeks? I will let you know, because I am the platforming king. But before we get into that, why don't you give us a like? Why don't you subscribe? Why don't you do whatever on the service, whatever service you're using, do whatever it is to support the algorithm. Look, I need it. I need the validation. Oh, you got to give it to me, people. I love those likes. I love those views. They make me feel like I'm worth something. So I appreciate every one of them. While you're at it, if you want to be a part of the podcast too, you can get validation from me, the guy you're listening to right now. Wouldn't that be special? You can send an email into the pluginplaypodcast1@gmail.com, email.address, and you can have your question, comment, or concern read out on the show. Be a part of it. It's in the description if it's too much, as well as timestamps. It's a labor of love. I do it for you. If you don't like what I'm saying, if you don't like listening to me that much, maybe a little bit, but not that much, you can just skip to whatever the heck you want. It is a wonderful thing that technology has provided for us, and I do it for you. It takes time and it takes effort. But how about we get into it, ladies and gentlemen? We actually have a decent bit to get through. It wasn't until, the past couple of days I was like, oh, dang, there's nothing. There's no news. There's no news. Thank goodness we had a nice Nintendo Direct that dropped. We'll get into that. Probably we'll save that towards the end. But we had a good bit of news kind of come out. Did some research on a few topics I want to talk about that's kind of hot in the news right now. But the first is Outer Worlds 2. You hear about this? You know about this? Outer Worlds 2, Microsoft's big flagship game of 2025, which is kind of sad, considering they own so many publishers, is back to being $70. It was their first $80 game, at least was supposed to be, until very recently. They have now made it $70, yet again, $69.99, and they will be issuing refunds to anyone who's pre-ordered the game. This has been a long in contention topic in the gaming industry. In whatever forum or internet conversation you probably are a part of, you will see people say, OMG, $80, that's too much for a game. What are these people thinking? I'll never pay that money. And Nintendo opened the floodgates, we all know, technically released the first $80 game with Mario Kart World, even though it's not really $80 because you can get it for $50 by getting a bundle, which why wouldn't you do that? Come on, you silly Billy, just get the bundle. But $80 is definitely a hard pill to swallow, even though I think economically that makes sense. We can get into the debate another time, but I think the big thing here is everybody was like, oh, well, we complained. Hello. We told Microsoft this is a problem. I don't like this. And they listened. Microsoft, the trillion-dollar company, actually, as yesterday, I think, as time of recording, they're the second company ever to reach $4 trillion valuation behind NVIDIA, but the second biggest company in the world listened to me, and they said this tiny part of our business that is not really the major profit-driving sector of our business, we really need to respond to these guys, and we really need to give them that $70 game. Let's be real. I think ultimately this was a move for Game Pass. Like, making $80 games is, I think, where we're going very, very shortly. Like, I think 2026 is the year of the $80 game. Right now we have like a couple of games that are $80. Battlefield 6 was revealed this week as well. And they confirmed we're not going to be touching 60, or we're not going to be touching 80. It's going to be 70. Same thing with Borderlands. Recently, there was conversations around that being 80, and it ended up being 70 MSRP. So, like, a lot of these big games that I assumed were definitely going to be like, no, dude, you got to be 80. You got to pay 80, bro, is not going the distance with that. I think 2026, you're going to start seeing people double down on that. Nintendo's going to be doubling down on it. And I think when you start seeing actual games being released for $80, we're going to start seeing, like, outside of Mario Kart World, like, you're going to start seeing everybody move in that direction. So I think, you know, batten down the hatches. This conversation is not over by a long shot. But, you know, like, I think when you make all of Microsoft's games, which is what they announced, all of our titles moving forward are going to be $80, guess what that means? It means if you're signing up for Game Pass, you're saving an extra $10 on every game you play, which I think is the obvious move. Like, Microsoft is trying to make Game Pass seem like a better deal. It's really all over the place with the economy, or the economics and the finances behind Game Pass. It seems like Game Pass is surprisingly become pretty stagnant, and I think they're very disappointed by that, and that's why they're moving to multi-plat and, you know, like, all this other stuff, and trying to raise the price of the games specifically, and then decreasing them because they're clearly still relying on you buying the copy individually. It seems at odds with what Microsoft has completely dismantled the entire like premise of Xbox to be. Like, Xbox was basically suicide bombed. Like, they strapped a Xbox Game Pass bomb vest to their chest, and they ran into the gaming industry and set it off. Like, they intentionally threw Xbox under the bus so that they could have Game Pass survive. And it really does seem like they're struggling to decide moving forward what the best way to deal with that is. I think, here I am, the conspiracy theorist. Not really. I think this has got to be what happened, is pre-orders were just not good. And I don't think it had anything to do with the game being $80 either. Like, that's my hot take, you know? Is like, yeah, pre-orders probably for Outer Worlds 2 were probably not great. And why is that? Well, because I don't think Outer Worlds 1 was very good. Like, I think that's a really obvious answer to the question. I think history has been really unkind to Outer Worlds 1. I think you look at Outer Worlds 1 right now, and you look at the reviews on Outer Worlds 1, it's like an 85, 86, something like that. It's a pretty good scoring game. I played Outer Worlds 1, and I am very vocal about how mid that game is, like how I had to really force myself through the end of that game and was really disappointed by it by the end of the time that I had with it. But at the time, it was like this big middle finger to Bethesda because they were making like Fallout 76, and like they hadn't improved their games in over 2 decades, and like everybody was just kind of pissed off at them and was like, we need to support Obsidian, they're the true Bethesda that we all deserve. And then like the game was honestly like okay, not that great, and like, you know, I think people look back on that now and kind of agree with that. And like, I don't think you find anybody right now that's like a big Outer Worlds defender. I think everybody pretty much that's played Outer Worlds is like, oh yeah, it was, I mean, it's not really that great. It's okay. You know, like it's all right. They've made better games. You know, it's no New Vegas, you know. You know, that's kind of the conversation around that game. So what that tells me is ain't nobody frickin' pre-ordering Outer Worlds 2 because the first one just wasn't that good. So like, I think the pre-orders for this game were probably abysmal. I see nobody really talking this game up. I see no footage from this game being, like a great thing. And then you had Avowed come out, which is from their B team, admittedly, but it was a very Obsidian game, very similar to Outer Worlds, and it did not review hot like hotcakes. It was an 80 flat on Metacritic, which is just like, it's all right. That's kind of what that means. So, I think Outer Worlds 2 is going to be kind of similar. It's probably going to be like an 81, 82, 83 if they're really lucky, kind of deal. And, I think pre-orders were probably soft, and that was pretty much the reason behind this is they were like, okay, maybe the, landmark title for us to make our first $80 game and really try to get people okay with that is not the Outer Worlds 2. Just because it's our big Q4 game of this year does not mean it is going to be a huge splash. And they kind of evaluated that, and they made their decision to pull it back. And I think it's a very interesting decision. Don't get me wrong. I'm surprised they did it. But I don't know. I think this is a lot more complicated than just oh, well, we really didn't like it, and so Microsoft decided not to do it anymore. I think you're really overestimating your power as a guy typing how mad he is on the internet over this kind of stuff, because I don't think it matters. As long as the pre-order numbers are there, as long as the game sells, they don't care. They're not going to change jack. So, I don't know. That's my take. Maybe it's a little hot. Maybe it's a little meh, like the Outer Worlds. I don't know. You tell me. But you can't, because I'm on a podcast and you're not. So, moving on. This one I actually really enjoyed doing the research for, because in all honesty, I don't see many news outlets really talking about this. Many people that I follow really delving into. I think there's a few reasons for this, so we're going to get into it. This is itch.io removing all 18-plus games from platforms, or from their platform after pressure from payment processors. So, your MasterCard, your Visas, your all of the above, really. They made them take down all their NSFW games, which, I kind of saw people getting mad about. I mean, I don't really play that many of them. I play some ones that I find weird and interesting. What is it? Sex with Hitler? That's you got me, okay? You got me. That's freaking a funny game. Let's be real. That's a game on Steam. Look it up. Very popular kind of meme game that you can gift to your friends for $1.50. I've definitely done that, and it's worth every penny because it's a funny porn game. That's just weird and odd and funny. And, I'm totally down for that. And I would love to see that. That's right up my alley, right up my sense of humor, okay? But, and then, Sex with Hitler 2099, where you have sex with Hitler in the future, that's crazy. That's the imagination, the innovation of porn games. But anyway, I think that this story has a lot of touchy subjects in it, and this story has a lot of topics that a lot of people would be probably taken down from surfaces or demonetized or whatever the heck you want to say for talking about. So I ain't no chicken, and I also don't make a living off of this, so I'm okay talking about it, and I will talk about it. But I don't see many people talking about it because I'm assuming, and this story does go into some freaking dark stuff, okay? That most people don't really want to give ad revenue to. So I kind of get that, right? But let's start from the top here, okay? Gonna get into it because the top is really where it's the spiciest, okay? The top is a game comes out on Steam and itch.io. It's called No Mercy, where you become, quote unquote, every woman's worst nightmare. I'll let that sink in. So let your imagination run wild. What do you think every woman's worst nightmare is? That was pretty much in the news the best way I saw it represented that people were willing to say, okay? I'm going to get into it in a second what exactly it was, but this was a game that was clearly meant to be vulgar intentionally excessively inflammatory, like meant to be controversial, okay? And it kind of reminds me of another story several years ago of a game called Hatred, which did the exact same thing. It is a a game where you play as a shooter that, like, you go into your office and, like, you're like a edgy dude in, like, a trench coat and, like, long black hair, and, like, you're like, I'm gonna make them all pay, and you freaking go into your, like, an office and you shoot up all your coworkers and, like, kill the police and everything like that. And that was during a time where, you know, like, school shootings and office shootings and stuff were on the rise, so it was incredibly insensitive and inflammatory and all that other stuff, you know, like, and so, of course, drew a lot of controversy. People tried to get it removed from storefronts. It's actually still up. Like, I think you can still play Hatred to this day. It is a very mid game. It is not worth playing outside of the subject matter itself. That's like it. Isometric top-down shooter, not always a red flag. Isometric top-down, always a red flag. But anyway, this was kind of, you know, like, in the same vein. It was intentionally made to be like, haha, or not haha, but, like, we're really trying to be, like, controversial to kind of drum up clicks and get attention. Kind of the same thing happened here. So I have, we'll get into it in a second. How about we'll let your imagination run wild on that for a little bit? How about that? The game was immediately taken down from itch.io. Okay, so the game stayed up on Steam. So Steam was like, look, we deal with this kind of thing all the time. Okay. It's porn. We got a lot of that stuff on our site. It is what it is. We ain't going to do nothing about it. Maybe the moderation team just didn't have time to get around to it, but itch.io, snap, crackle, and pop, that thing was gone, okay? So after a bunch of groups called for the game to be taken down, they tried to contact Steam, tried to let them know this is not cool, okay? We don't really like this game that much. And there was apparently a lot of backlash that I personally did not see. But, like, this was apparently a game people were up in arms about, okay? This group called Collective Shout, which we kind of have to get into Collective Shout, okay? Because there's a lot of people online. All the conversation I saw about Collective Shout was like, F these guys. And I had to do my research on these guys because I was like, what the frick is going on here? A lot of people don't like these guys, okay? They are a group, they're a woman activist group that is against sexualization and exploitation of women. Sounds pretty admirable. I don't like my women to be exploited, so that's fine. I think that's a fine mission statement. Well, they come out and they're like, hey, we can't get the game taken down on our own volition. We need some help. So they write an open letter to all the payment processors. Like I said, MasterCard, Visa, Stripe, the lot of them. And they say, hey, we want this taken down. We are not going to use your... Like, do you want your payment processing means to be associated with this filth? This disgusting stuff. I'm sorry, I'm not literate enough to come up with better words that at least aren't, you know, PG, you know? But anyway, so they write a letter to them and they say, hey, take this stuff down. So this is something that I don't hear about that much, but, like, I think it's worth noting. Debanking is like a freaking thing, and I mean, like, as long as you're typically pretty okay, that doesn't really matter. So if you didn't know, your bank can just stop letting you do stuff. They can stop letting you get checks and, you know, like, use a credit card and stuff like that. And it is debilitating. If you've ever thought about, like, how your life works and how money works, you probably think about payment processors a lot because you buy things a lot and you try to get money put in your account at your bank a lot. And so if you don't have access to a bank and you don't have access to a credit card, you are living in a cash society. Like, you can do nothing except for accept cash. And, like, that makes your life incredibly, incredibly difficult. because a lot of people can't pay you unless it's like a direct deposit. A lot of people won't accept cash, or they'll accept cash, but like an online purchase, like you can't buy anything online. So like, and that's where these storefronts do business, is obviously online. You don't go into the Steam store at your local Walmart, the Steam section of your local Walmart, and buy a game. Like, you have to do it on your computer virtually with a credit card. So like, these guys were essentially trying to get these people debanked, which is totally debilitating. So let me read a bit of this open letter, okay? So I've kind of left it ambiguous up to this point. We got bad stuff in this game, right? You're a woman's worst nightmare, okay? Here's where the stuff gets a little dicey, okay? So this game was about the R word, okay? Well, I'll try to keep that, the R word. I think a lot of people don't like it when you use the R word on any kind of platform. So I don't know this stuff. I've never talked about it on the podcast, okay? So, like, this is way outside of my norm, okay? So, child SA, okay? And I think you can say this, incest. I think that's a cool word. I don't see people trying to dodge that one too often. So, R word, child SA, and incest is themes that are very prevalent in this game, okay? So, this game is where you, according to Collective Shout in their letter, game players assume the persona of a man who R-words his female family members, including his mother, his aunt, as punishment for his mother's infidelity. Now, this is, I don't even know how I'm going to say this, but I really think it's worth saying to get across the point of, like, this is what obviously made them upset. So this is from the game's description. So if you go to the store page with No Mercy on Steam or itch.io, you will read this from the developers. In this game, you'll either become every woman's worst nightmare, or rather, the best penis they'll ever have. They, of course, don't say penis. Your goal is simple. Leave no vagina not effed, since that's the only thing they all want. Never take no for an answer. F your mom. F your auntie. Even F your friend's mom. Why not? That's take what's yours and show no mercy. So that's what they were not happy about. And in all honesty, I kind of get it. That's a little over the top. That's a little unsettling. And I would think that a feminist group that fights for women and the exploitation of them would not be cool with a game like that being active on a storefront. So this just happened to be inflammatory enough. It did its job. It got clicks. It got eyes. And it just so happened to get the attention of this feminist group that was active enough and connected enough to be like, hey, maybe we can completely deplatform these mother effers, and they did it, okay? So now MasterCard, Visa, all these guys, they start pulling support for Steam and itch.io. Here's where things get a little bit more interesting. Steam responded by just updating their terms of service. They said, hey, and I looked at their terms of service, their updated terms of service, and I was just like, this just looks like what I assumed the terms of service would be. It's like, basically, like, don't put any child stuff on here, don't put any, like, sexual assault. And in all honesty, there's definitely stuff on there. Like, I have played games where you do some effed up stuff on Steam that's, like, just intended to be, like, totally, like, over-the-top ridiculous, like, offensive stuff. And I'm like, okay, well, then they probably need to remove some games. So, because they definitely didn't catch them all. But anyway, like, they basically, it looked like they really hadn't updated them that much. But here's the problem is, like, or here's the thing is, like, Steam has it's a really big company, right? It's way bigger than itch.io, which primarily is like kind of almost an indie platform for the most part. And it's like, okay, we got a bunch of other payment processors and they're cool with us. Like, we've signed with a lot of other payment processors. So if Visa and MasterCard say no thanks, we still have backups. Itch.io is way smaller, and so they had one. They had one payment processor. It was Stripe. And they were like, hey, we can't do this anymore. Sayonara, big boy. We don't want to do any more business with you. And that put basically itch.io at a standstill. There was no way for them to make money. Like, they couldn't take any kind of money from people because everything was digital and online. And so it was like, okay, well, frick, just remove everything. Get it off. Like, you know, like we have to get everything off so that hopefully the store, like the payment processors will be like cool with us again and we'll be able to take people's money and move on. And so that's what they did. And, you know, like they kind of immediately went into talks with the payment processors and they were like, look, guys, like we'll do whatever you need. Like, let's talk about this, but we can't like not have any payment processing. Like, we have to in order to survive. And, you know, currently they're in talks. But what eventually happened is, as of like today or yesterday, at time of recording, they were like, okay, well, we'll put up all the free not safe for work stuff again, right? So now they can essentially say, hey, this is, you know, we're good to go because this is not going to require a payment processor at all. And I don't think the payment processors are against all pornographic material. They're just against the really ridiculous over-the-top stuff. But, like, they have to go through and comb through and make sure everything's to their liking before they kind of give a sign-off and are allowed to move forward. So, like, you know, makes sense, right? But, you know, that's kind of where we're at here. And I think it's highly likely that itch.io will get payment processors to come back. You know, it'll be all right. You know, it's a blip. We've hit a blip here. It's a major issue for itch.io. I think gamers have responded as gamers do. And they are very upset. You're taking away my games. This is free speech, yada, 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 which I'm all about. Trust me, I'm a game preservationist. I'm a free speech absolutist for the most part. But, like, you know, I see a lot of people really dogging on this collective shout group. And, like, I had thought these people were, like, a Christian, highly right-wing, like, you know, authoritarian kind of group that was just, like, trying to really enforce, like, well, if Jesus didn't want this game on Steam, then nobody should have it. And, like, that's kind of like what we were dealing with here, because that's what I read. You know, like, that's what everybody was saying is, like, these people are really messed up. And, like, okay, I'll be objective, and that's what I try to be on this show, okay? I think, objectively, Collective Shout had a good excuse to target this game. I think they probably went a little far. Admittedly, Steam kind of was like, F off, we don't want to take the game down, which is their right as a storefront, but of course it's going to, you know, the right of the payment processors is to remove their service from the storefront if you don't want to do what they want. So, like, it's, you know, it's capitalism, what can I say? But, like, in this instance, I think Collective Shout, objectively, let's be real, okay, let's be real, has a pretty understandable goal they're trying to achieve, okay? Do they do things in a way that I don't appreciate, and do they go after things that sometimes they probably don't need to? Absolutely, okay? In this instance, I don't think they really, other than really bringing the payment processors into it, I really don't think they did anything super effed up. You know, like, I think that this game was effed up. It really shouldn't be allowed on storefronts for the most part. I think it's clearly, like, you know, like, a problem. You know, like this was, if this was allowed to kind of snowball and more games were allowed to be added like this, eventually this is going to happen anyway, okay? Like, I think this is just kind of one of those things that you just kind of have to nip in the bud up front, and, like, you have to, you know, like, yeah, sure, I'm a free speech absolutist in a way, right? But I understand that there is a freaking response to what you say, and, like, you should probably think about it because there's consequences, and in this case, the consequences are, well, no payment processors, and your business is going to be really messed up. And, like, I totally get that. There was an overcorrection with the payment processors having to remove everything, all that other stuff. Steam was able to kind of get around that because it's a little bit more well set up. But, like, people are... Okay, what really this comes down to is, yes, Collective Shout is a radical feminist group because they are second-wave feminists, okay? If you don't know the difference between a first, second, third wave, first is like what your grandma was. She got to vote. Yippee-ki-yay. That's first wave. Second wave and third wave are during more modern feminists. You may or may not be aware. Second wave distinguishes themselves from third waves by being what most people would call TERFs, which is trans exclusionary radical feminists, which means they don't like trans people for reasons we don't need to get into. But this is clearly this kind of a group, right? They've clearly done a lot that has been anti-trans people. Whatever you think about trans people, they don't like them very much. They've made several campaigns against trans people, and, like, that is what it is, okay? That's their politics. And I think a lot of people are using their past actions to be like, hey, I don't like them because they've done all this other stuff I don't like. And it's like, well, that's cool, and I totally get that. And you can demonize the organization if you want, but in all honesty, I get why they did it. I get why this pissed them off, and it kind of is meant to piss people off. That's, you know, I think that's literally what the game is attempting to do, and it did that, and it just so happened to get the attention of somebody who probably shouldn't have gotten the attention of, because they were going to do something about it. You know, like, that's what ended up happening here, right? So, like, I think it's, you know, kind of messed up that processors hold so much power and that the Gooners are really going to take an L from this one. I do, okay? I really genuinely do. But again, I am also of the side, like, look, F around and find out. Like, that's what freaking happened here. Like, Steam F'd around, and they found out. And in all honesty, itch.io became the real big, you know, loser in this situation, and they did most everything correctly. Like, when they, you know, had feedback that was like, this game is offensive, they took it down. And Steam didn't. And that's what prompted the payment processors to get involved, or, you know, Collective Shout to get involved, and then involve the payment processors. So, you know, like, in all honesty, I see this as, like, gamers versus feminists. Like, this is another one of those kind of issues. And, like, I'm like, bro, I don't know. I think it's a lot more complicated than that. I think, you know, there were definitely some mistakes made on all ends here, and, like, nobody here is really without fault. And, like, it's super unfortunate that we all have to have our games taken away like this. And, you know, like, I think really, though, Steam really didn't take much of a hit at all. And I don't think moving forward, Steam's going to be very different. It's really itch.io, which is a very small platform that whoever listening to this, probably doesn't even use, like, to be super upfront. And, like, you know, like, I feel for itch.io because they genuinely didn't really do anything wrong, and they're taking the biggest loss here. So, you know, I think this situation, I'm really glad I did the legwork here, because, like, pretty much everywhere I saw was like, oh yeah, Collective Shout's a bunch of losers and I hate them, and, you know, like, this is really just effed up that it's happening at all. And it's like, because the way it was framed to me was like, all 18 plus games are being removed because, like, a radical group didn't like them. And it's like, that's not really true at all. Like, we really want to break this down. It's like, they didn't like games that involved really dark and radical topics. Like they specifically only call out this game not because it's porn, but because it involves sexualization that is kind of messed up and like probably shouldn't be out there, So like they weren't against all not safe for work games. They were just against, the ones doing the things they didn't like. And I think the things they didn't like are kind of understandable. So like I think gamers saying like kind of twisting this into like, well, like this is what's happening is like it's not really what's happening, Like I think it's understandable that you're pissed. Like look, dude, I haven't gone to Pornhub in like a year and a half because they want me to use a freaking VPN. Like my state is about to do some legislation that's going to stop people from getting on Pornhub without doing, having an 18-year-old, 18 or plus ID that we can verify with it. And, like, therefore, you shouldn't be allowed to be on this site. And it's like, oh, frick. Now I got to find another site. I've been using this one since I was, like, 12. What the frick? But, it is what it is. I hope my mom isn't listening to that. But, that was all a joke. I've never. I think 12 is definitely exaggeration, though. Maybe, like, 15, 16, 16. I'm going to say 16. I don't know. We all had that first experience at some point with Pornhub. Am I right, fellas? Am I right? But, So, like, I think that's messed up. I don't think that's cool all around when somebody takes away my porn. But it is what it is, bro. It is what it is. Maybe you shouldn't do what they did. That's kind of where I'm at. Anyways. We got two big old Nintendo topics. Thanks for sticking around past that. Jeez, that was... I kind of felt a little uncomfortable. I feel like I was really trying to tiptoe around it half the time. I was like, should I be saying that? I don't know if I should be saying that. Feels a little gross. I feel like I'm about to get this episode banned. Like, I've turned away any potential listener. Got a little political. Got a little spicy. A little too spicy and sometimes. I don't know about that. I don't know about that one. I think I understand now why people don't ever talk about it. But I do think it's incredibly important to talk about. Because, I think that's a big deal. I think that's a really big deal. But anyway, I'll do my due diligence. Next up, two big old Nintendo topics. We had a Direct that happened just a couple of days ago at the time of recording. And people weren't too happy about it. So to give some pretext to preface this whole topic here, this Direct, we had been hearing rumors about a Nintendo Direct for weeks. Nate the Hate, a very popular, very reliable leaker, was like, hey, there's going to be a July Direct. Hold on to your britches. And pretty much everybody was waiting for that because there really hasn't been a lot since the Nintendo Switch 2 came out. We haven't heard much from Nintendo outside of like Donkey Kong Bananza, So everybody's like, okay, cool. Well, it finally, like the last week of July hit, and we were getting like, it was like July 29th, and everybody's like, we sure about this? You 100% on that one, Nate? And he's like, yes, I am. I'm a god, and I know everything. And yep, it happened. The 31st, the very last day of July, it squeaked in at the finish line. We had a Nintendo Direct. But here's the thing is I think everybody's expectations were a little high. We had rumors going in and around. There's going to be a bunch of first-party announcements. It's like, okay, where is Metroid? We don't have a release date for Metroid Prime yet. What's going on with that? We got Pokemon coming out in just a couple of months. We've heard nothing on that for a long time. We've got a lot that could really be talked about and kind of put out into the ether from Nintendo, but we don't know nothing, or we don't know as much as we'd probably prefer. But Nintendo had a lot of potential talking points that they could have thrown out there. So people's expectations were really high for a just Nintendo Direct, talking about Nintendo stuff. Well, when they announced the Direct the day before, they said, hey, it's actually going to be a partner Direct. So we're only going to be talking mostly about like third-party stuff, you know? And as soon as I heard that, I was like, this Direct is going to suck. But, like, most of the time, even partner directs at Nintendo have, like, a big announcement that everybody's kind of cool with. And, like, you know, a big kind of third-party announcement that people are like, well, we'll announce our game at Nintendo Direct because, I mean, I think when I glanced at the YouTube count for the Direct, it was like 250,000 people watching concurrently. Like, massive. You know, like, you get a lot of eyeballs on your game, and a lot of people like me just talking about the Direct in general, so a lot more word of mouth, if you announce during a Direct. So, like, it's you know, it's not uncommon to see a game get announced, and we did get several games announced here, but it's a matter of, you know, quality over quantity, right? So here is the problem. We had a lot of games that were ports being announced here. We had a lot of games that were sequels to games nobody really gave a frick about being announced here, and we're going to get into it. Starting with the very first game of the Direct, Monster Hunter Stories 3 Twisted Reflection. Now, if you don't know Monster Hunter Stories is basically, if you've heard of Monster Hunter, one of the biggest gaming IP from Capcom. Obviously, the people who do Resident Evil, you know, Mega Man, etc., and so on. Monster Hunter Stories is the turn-based, story-based game that is based on the Monster Hunter world. So think Pokemon meets Monster Hunter. It's typically kind of been geared towards children from what I've seen. It's kind of supposed to be like a child gateway point to the Monster Hunter series, so then you can kind of be introduced to it and then, you know, kind of get funneled into the Monster Hunter proper series as you get older. At least, again, that's what I've kind of seen from the previous games. 3 looks a little bit more mature. It looks like, okay, well, 1 and 2 are kind of for 8-year-olds. 3 is for like a 10, 12-year-old. So, you know, like, ooh, we're getting a little bit spicy here with Monster Hunter Stories. But yeah, it looked fine. It's another generic-looking JRPG. Story didn't seem to be too interesting. Didn't see much combat here. Moving on. You know, like, that's kind of what I'm going to be saying for the vast majority of these games. Next up was Once Upon a Katamari. I'm a very big Katamari fan, or I'm not going to say very big, but I enjoy a good Katamari game. Seldomly, every once in a while, I'll be like, oh yeah, Katamari, that's fun. You know, like, I've played 3 or 4 Katamari games, some to completion, some to not. You know, like, they're all kind of the same. And that's kind of what I get when I look at this one, is like, ooh, another Katamari game. Like, that could be fun when it's discounted to $5, or I get it for free for some subscription service, and, you know, like, I'll play another Katamari game, and that'd be cool. But it's like, you know, it's a time-traveling Katamari Damacy. So you're going to the prehistoric area, you're going to ancient Rome, stuff like that. But another Katamari Damacy game. So nothing to set the world on fire. Next up, Just Dance 2026, the hottest Wii title. I say that if you don't know, Just Dance was the last game to ever come to the Wii, because it was still selling gangbusters on the Wii like a decade after the Wii had come out. After the Wii had stopped, like, Nintendo had even stopped making games for the Wii. It was like a decade later, Just Dance was still, like, selling millions of copies on the Wii. So, like, insane for some reason, but, like, people who senior citizens, I guess, really love Just Dance. But anyway, Just Dance 2026, it's another Just Dance. You ever heard of that? That Just Dancing game? Yep, that's another one. Next up was Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. Now you may wonder, oh, that's cool, another Dragon Ball game? Yeah, it already came out. That's a port. It's a fighting game. It did okay. Reviews. You like Dragon Ball? Cool. You're gonna like that one. You know, that's kind of, it's an anime fighter. So essentially, you know, any anime fighter is. Do you watch the show? Do you like the show? Well, this is the only video game you're going to get, so you better like it. And, like, that's kind of every Dragon Ball game, you know, is like, not every Dragon Ball game, The Arc System Works Dragon Ball game is actually supposed to be pretty good, but like, still, like, do you think a competitive fighting game player is going to be like, I'm going to leave Street Fighter and play Dragon Ball, the Arc System Works Dragon Ball game because like it's just that much better? It's like, well, no, they're all kind of the same. They just have different characters. They kind of that deal. There are differences, I know, but like for a guy like me who doesn't play fighting games, it doesn't make a difference. Next up, Plant vs. Zombies Replanted. Have you ever wanted to play Plants vs. Zombies again? Well, then you can play Plants vs. Zombies Replanted. It's a $20 version of the same game that you played in 2008. Henry, you're being hard on it. Well, okay, yeah, it's an HD update. You do have a co-op mode, and you do have PvP. That's it. That's all they're adding to it for $20. I mean, I love Plants vs. Zombies. It's honestly probably one of my favorite games. I got really fond memories of Plants vs. Zombies. I'm not saying it's like freaking top 10 or anything, but it's like, like I had a really great time. I have really great memories of Plants vs. Zombies. It's genuinely really good game. Why don't they just make another Plants vs. Zombies? I don't know why they got to just make the first one again. You're like, Henry, but they did. They made Garden Warfare. Bro. It's so sad to think about what happened to that series. Like, Plants vs. Zombies is considered one of the best games ever made, and then it's like, well, yeah, they never really did anything else like it again. It's like, why? Well, they made a third-person shooter like 3 times. They took the IP and made like a third-person shooter with it 3 different times. What the frick? Why'd they make it into a third-person shooter? I don't know, but those games are also kind of good. I actually liked Garden Warfare. But then they also made Plants vs. Zombies 2. You probably didn't know that, but it was a mobile-only game, and it was like a free-to-play game. So like it was like filled to the brim with microtransactions, and the game was essentially ruined because of it. So, it's one of those things. EA bought it. What can we say? EA. Oh, you little devil. Speaking of EA, next up was EA Sports Football Club 2026. It's a football game. Specifically soccer for everybody listening to this, I'm sure. But so football, cool. Next up was Pac-Man World 2 Repack. Pac-Man World, that PlayStation 2 platformer that people really like to swear by when they played it, if they played it when they were 5. But if you play it today, it's like really mediocre and horrible. Yeah, that one. It has a sequel, and like they remade Pac-Man World 1 a while back, and now they made Pac-Man World 2 Repack. So if you grew up playing that game as an 8-year-old, or maybe even like a 5 or 6-year-old, you're in luck. I actually did play Pac-Man World Repack. So the first one that was remade, it was a free PlayStation Plus game. I was like, oh, dude, I've heard so many people talk about how great this is. Dude, it was mind-numbing. I was like, this is a game for a 4-year-old. Like, that is who the target demographic for this is. It is old school. It is not aged well. It is boring. And, you're going to get the second one of those. Cool. Next up was Final Fantasy Tactics. I'm heavily looking forward to this game. I've already got it pre-ordered. I had a $10 gift card to Best Buy that they gave me just like in an email. Like, I didn't like pay for it or anything. So I was like, yeah, sure, I'll just pre-order freaking Final Fantasy Tactics. I really want to play that game. I've always wanted to play Final Fantasy Tactics. It's supposed to be one of the best tactic games ever made, if not the best tactic games ever made. And, cool. But yeah, this is coming to all platforms. We already know a lot about it. And no surprise. So that's cool. Next up, a lot of people were happy about this, but I think it's boring. Persona 3 Reload. Now look, I played Persona 3 Reload on Game Pass last year. I really enjoyed it. It was actually my 3rd favorite game of last year. If you listened to my top 5 games of last year episode, my Game Awards episode, before it was taken down for copyright violations because I wanted to make it epic and put game music in it, and Square Enix didn't like that very much. They don't want you putting One Winged Angel in your podcast. They will take it down, just FYI. But anyway, people were like, yo, dude, Persona 3 Reload. It's like, cool. A game that will be 2 years old by the time that it comes out on the Switch 2. That's pretty nice. And like I know why people love that. It's like, oh dude, handheld Persona? Yo, that's so rad. Because let's be real, Persona is a really, like when you look at Persona as what it is, you're like, dude, this is definitely a game that you should have on a handheld device because like it's such a pick up and play kind of game. Like you can just do like 1 or 2 days or something like that, or just do like one dungeon run or something like that and put the game down and come back to it, like, you know, like on the bus or something like that, you know? And, you know, that's a great formula for a handheld device, but if you didn't give a frick about Persona until it was announced on a handheld, for one, buy a freaking Steam Deck. You could have played it 2 years ago. You know, like, why are you holding out for everything on the Switch when there are alternatives? And two, like, why does it, like, you had to play it on handheld? Like, you refused to play Persona 3 Reload without it being handheld? Like, I don't know. That just seems to me like, who is this really for? It's for a really small crowd that I guess for some reason was like, yo, I'm just dedicated to this Nintendo platform and I refuse to go anywhere else. And like, that's fine, but you know, it doesn't make it a very exciting announcement. Next up was Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment. This game has already been announced. It is a sequel to the or it's not a sequel. It's technically a prequel to Tears of the Kingdom. But it is, you know, it's canonic. I saw a lot of people talking about it. They're like, I can't wait to see the story for this game. I'm like, bro, was the story of Tears of the Kingdom that moving? Like, and I have a friend who thinks it's like one of the, like, he like cried playing it and stuff. I'm like, okay, that's cool, but like, you probably just don't play many games. You know, like, yeah, sure, the story was fine. The story was fine in Tears of the Kingdom, but it wasn't like freaking revolutionary, you know, like, or anything like that. And Zelda games never are. It's, you know, you're saving the princess, and that's cool. Admittedly, Tears of the Kingdom had a little bit more going on than most Zelda games, but like, that was like just at one point in the game, you know, like most of the game doesn't have much story at all. But anyway, this is another Dynasty Warriors game. I actually played the demo for Hyrule Warriors a long time ago, and I actually enjoyed it like a good bit, like the Breath of the Wild Hyrule Warriors game, and I actually thought it was fun. But I have been taught many a time that, like, yeah, Dynasty Warrior games look really cool until you play them for like 30 minutes, and then like you realize that you have had more than enough of that game, and you don't ever want to touch it again. And that's what this game is likely going to be for me. So, you know, like, enjoy the game for like an hour and then like realize that it's super repetitive and you don't want anything to do with it anymore. And that's cool. So cool. You know, basically it's just an excuse for people to get more usage out of the Tears of the Kingdom world if they were really into it. So moving on, next up, Madden 2026. Yep. Next up, Chilling by the Fire. Chilling by the Fire was an interesting one, at least. It is a very indie-looking, low-budget game chat excuse. You are literally just, it's a campfire simulator. You're putting logs on a fire, and like you have to dry out the logs if they're wet by putting them next to the fire before you put them in the fire, and that's like pretty much it. That's all you do in the game, and you can bring in your friends with game chat, and if they have that little camera that you pay like another freaking, probably something really expensive, I think it's like $80 or something like that for those cameras, then you can see their faces while you're talking around the campfire. And bro, I'll just call my friend. Like, I will just pick up the phone, you know, like I don't need the chilling by the fire, the game, to facilitate a reason for me to talk to people. Like, I can just call them, you know, like, I don't know. There is a market for this game. People thought it looked interesting. It definitely is the most interesting idea here, but it's still not for me. I won't touch it with a 10-foot pole. Apex Legends. You know Apex Legends. You've probably heard of a little game called Apex Legends, a little game that couldn't run on the Switch 1, so of course it's coming to Switch 2. Cool. Next up was actually a game that was like different. Hella. So Hella is like a platformer where you play as a mouse, and she has a frog backpack. And this frog backpack, you can use the tongue of the frog to like swing and like grapple places and like pull objects around the environment. It looked okay. Like, it's definitely the most interesting game because it's not like a port or something in this direct or a sequel or whatever, but like, it didn't look that interesting. Like, I'm not going to play this game. I got too much to play. This game didn't look like, and I don't think anybody's like, this game looks amazing. Like, this is my most anticipated game of the direct. You know, like, it just looked fine. There's like co-op in it. Cool. Next up, Star Wars Outlaws, the game that Ubisoft has admitted is a failure and a disappointment, coming to the Switch too. Because maybe we'll make, a little bit of money or something. Who knows, Save us from bankruptcy, Ubisoft. Cool. Nobody cared about that game. Maybe it's better. They patched out a lot of stuff I've heard that made it a bad time, but still probably not very good. Next up, Chronos, The New Dawn. Have you heard of it? Because it has been announced. It has been shown off at other conferences before. We know about it. It is the Bloober Team follow-up to Silent Hill 2. It is, you're playing as a dude in, like, space or something. You look like an astronaut. This is a game that is kind of, I don't know, getting more hype than it probably deserves. I played Silent Hill 2 Remake. It was great, but I think it is entirely because it is made literally carbon copy of a game that was already fantastic. So, like, if it wasn't good, that's a problem. Like, they really did something wrong. If they didn't just follow the blueprint that was given to them. Beyond this, Bloober Team has never done anything that is particularly good or great, or I would even say, like, pretty much everything they've done has been mediocre or worse. So, like, I don't have any faith in Bloober Team making their own game, but people are like, well, they made Silent Hill 2 Remake, and even, like, the director of the studio is like, oh, no, dude, like, people just didn't give us credit. Like, we really are a great studio, and, like, Silent Hill 2 was finally the moment we were waiting for to show that we really are really good. And it's like, okay, yeah, I think Chronos, The New Dawn, is the moment you're waiting for to actually show everybody that you're really good, because I don't think Silent Hill 2 proved anything. Like, that's kind of where I'm at. But we'll see. I'm waiting to see how it will do. I will not play it unless it's like a 90 plus on Metacritic, which it won't be. Will not be. I don't think that game will be an 85 plus. So mark my words. Henry predicting the future. Next up, Yakuza Kiwami 2. Yep, it couldn't run on the Switch 1, so we moved to the Switch 2. And next up, we had a little montage of things that probably deserved a little bit more emphasis than something like Star Wars Outlaws, but we had a montage with Borderlands 4, NBA Bounce, Hello Kitty Island Adventure, Romancing Saga 2, and Shinobi Art of Vengeance. Played that demo for Shinobi, by the way. It's really actually quite good. Really looking forward to that. Probably play it at a discount, if not when it goes free, but like, still a solid game. That game was pretty cool. By the guys who did Streets of Rage 4, which is a really good game too. But, those are some more games. We know about all of them. They're on other platforms currently, and bye. Next up, we actually have what is the big announcement from Square Enix. We had 2 games with the HD 2D art style, which is the only reason anybody cares about Octopath Traveler. So first up was what I considered to be the most interesting one, which was, oh man, and this title, holy frick. Try not to be completely underwhelmed and tune me out after I say this. The Adventures of Elliot, the Millennium Tales. Discounting the fact that this is like a really boring name and like this game is really going to have to overcome some ridiculous word of mouth to get beyond that. The Adventures of Elliot is about Elliot. And you are basically going through dungeons in like a 2D isometric style game, and it's an action RPG. So the art style that's typically associated with this HD 2D kind of style is obviously turn-based games. They remade some games using that style. They obviously made Octopath Traveler 1 and 2, which are both in that style. And, you have In this case, the same style, which I think is beautiful, admittedly, a beautiful art style, but it's now an action RPG. So you can use like 8 different weapons is what they show. You have like a little fairy companion that you can use in co-op or single player, and it'll attack for you, or you can use its powers to kind of jump around. They released a demo day and date. I do intend to try it because this was one of the bigger announcements here. But like, like not anything that blows me away. The premise of the game looked pretty standard. Story looked pretty standard. You're in the last bastion of civilization, and you have to go out and fight monsters in dungeons. It's like, oh, okay, so, another JRPG. That's pretty cool. Combat didn't look particularly special. Again, like, the more I see this HD 2D style, the more I'm like, oh, dang, like, people really only play these games for this freaking art style. Like, these games aren't really something to write home about. And, like, people tell me that Octopath Traveler 2 is really good, but I know for a fact 1 was pretty mediocre, and, like, a lot of people kind of turned on that game after it came out. And I played it on Game Pass briefly, like, for a few hours, assuming I was going to get something out of it. And when I heard that, like, characters don't overlap their stories at all, which I thought was, like, the purpose of that, yeah, I bailed on it. And never looked back and never regretted it. So yeah, I guess in conjunction with that, the one more thing from this direct is Octopath Traveler 0. It seems to be a prequel to Octopath Traveler. I didn't know that the series had like a canonical lore that was worthy of going back and being a prequel of, but like, cool. So Octopath Traveler 0, it seems to be you're making your own character, and there's 30 recruitable party members that you can find across the game. Did you like Octopath Traveler 1? Did you like Octopath Traveler 2? Well, you probably like 0 then. So that's pretty cool. So that was it. And if you can tell, I'm a little underwhelmed, and I think a lot of people were too. I think a lot of this has to do with expectation. I think this was hyped up internally. People were really, or externally, not internally. Nintendo was hyping it up. But, like amongst forums, expectations were kind of through the roof. We were expecting a lot more to see from the Switch 2, because right now all we really have is Donkey Kong, which is out, and we'll talk about in a minute. And, of course, all these ports of Switch 1 games, Tears of the Kingdom, Kirby, Mario Party. Like, that's kind of all we have on the docket, for what we have. Pokemon, but that's like a Switch 1 game. Metroid Prime, we didn't know anything about, so like we really don't know a lot about the things that are coming out, so we kind of just assumed that there was a lot to talk about. Well, might as well do it now. A lot of these things is, hey, Nintendo is probably contractually obligated to do a lot of this stuff. Sony does the exact same thing with some of their directs. They do partner showcases as well, and they are, contractually obligated to show off a lot of these games. And that's probably no difference here. Yeah, this was an incredibly disappointing showcase. I totally get why everybody's kind of like, what the frick is this? It's kind of boring. It's kind of a letdown. Absolutely. I mean, this is easily like a D-. This is easily like a D-. We're borderline F+. Like, this is easily one of the lowest things I think I've ever rated in terms of showcases. I don't see anything here that made me excited. The games that are new aren't very interesting. The big 2 at the end announcements are 2 HD 2D games that I honestly don't care about that much, at the very least. Like, I guess The Adventures of Elliot, but like, I can't imagine that game being anything other than pretty, like, to be frank. There's probably better action RPGs out there. A lot of ports, a lot of remakes, a lot of sequels to games that I don't give a frick about. So it's like, who's this for? Very few people. So yeah, I'd say this direct was a massive flop, and it let a lot of people down, and I totally understand why. Really don't have a lot more to say about it, other than shortly after this direct, the very next day, at the time of recording, actually, Nintendo drops a bomb. Now, if you didn't know, the rest of the world happens outside of video games. Sometimes what's happening in the rest of the world affects video games. And in this case, August 1st, you may have heard of this, was the deadline for Donald Trump's tariffs to go into effect across the globe. Just so happened, right? This is something we've been anticipating for months. It keeps getting pushed back. It keeps, kind of getting, maybe I will, maybe I won't, kind of deal. And, we finally hit that deadline, and Trump was like, nope, we're going into effect. And here's what we got. Really, I'm not going to get into that. I'm not an economist. I don't have a list of all this stuff because it doesn't really matter in front of me. But there are two little countries that this is very important for. Those countries are, specifically, China, obviously. But in this case, for Nintendo, Vietnam and Cambodia are both hit with big tariffs, or tariffs that are substantial, we'll say. Not only that, but the reason this is a problem is because China has been in the tariff limelight for a while. And because of that, Nintendo, who did a lot of their manufacturing in China, was like, hey, let's try to find somewhere else. Let's try to figure out how to do this somewhere else. And so in the process, they said, hey, Vietnam, you're looking pretty hot over there. Cambodia, want to go to dinner? And they said, let's do some manufacturing over there because the tariffs aren't really affecting those countries as much. I think at one point it was like a total blanket tariff across the world or something. But like at some point it was way less than China. China was like 120% or something crazy like that. I'd have to go back. Again, I don't follow this stuff as closely as I do. I just hope to God that I can afford to live. That's kind of all I do. Please don't tax me any further with these tariffs, kind of deal. But like Vietnam and Cambodia was where they kind of moved a lot of their production for hardware and, other accessories and stuff like that. Those two countries got hit with these tariffs. Not only that, but they specifically, the Trump administration addressed like, hey, we know when you're trying to get around not paying tariffs in countries that are being tariffed a lot higher than other countries, so we're going to try and even make that a problem. So apparently there's even regulations that prevent you or like penalize you from trying to skirt tariffs by going to another country. Basically, Nintendo was like, okay, cool, so we're going to increase our prices to counteract the tariffs or to try and absorb some of the impact from the tariffs, right? This is, I'm sure you're sick of hearing this, but that's what happens, right? They pass it on to the consumer. Admittedly, apparently, that has not been as huge of a deal yet. Companies have been trying to absorb a lot of that, or at least a lot of companies have. But like, it's looking like it's going to be harder and harder moving forward, and we're gonna see some serious impacts moving forward. Number one is Nintendo, who immediately was like, "Hey, guess what? Switch 1 and accessories, those things are not going to be the same price anymore." And I was like, I almost didn't talk about this because I was like, well, one, we don't know what the price. They could go up by $1. Who knows? They could go up by $1, and who cares, right? Well, very shortly after the fact, Target, good old Target, accidentally increased their prices to reflect the tariffs. Now, admittedly, we don't know this. As of recording, you'll know as of the listening date. But as of recording, I don't know if these are the finalized prices that everybody's going to adhere to or anything like that, moving forward. But it's a pretty good indicator, right? It's a pretty good, I'd say that's a canary in the coal mine, absolutely. So these will go into effect August 3rd, which again, by the time you're listening to this, you should be paying a higher price. The Switch, and by Switch, I mean, now we have to distinguish, the very original Switch, the OG Switch, is currently, if you go to a store, Amazon, Walmart, whatever, and you try to pick one up, it's $299, $300. It's going to go up by $40 to $340. Switch OLED, that's $350 currently. It's going to go up by $50 to $400. Switch Lite, $199 to $29 or $229. Sorry about this. I should have just written down the dang numbers as rounded by a cent. But $230, so it's going up $30. And then they said, okay, and we're planning on increasing all sorts of other stuff too, amiibos, accessories, and stuff. The only things that Target gave us were the Alarmo, which if you don't remember, the Alarmo is Nintendo's alarm clock. Crazy. It's $100, which is already crazy, but it'll go up by 10% to $110. And then the Switch 2 Joy-Cons was also something that we saw going up. It's going to go up by a little less than 5%. So it's currently $95. It's going to go up to $100. So in response to that, I bought a second set of Joy-Cons, which on Amazon were on sale for $90. So technically I'm going to save about $10 on that, but like I always need a second set of controllers anyway because it makes it so that you don't have to like stop and charge your controller if it ever goes out. You can just like swap and continue playing on another controller. So I kind of consider having a secondary controller pretty vital for playing games. So like, you know, like I needed another one. I was planning on waiting until like Black Friday or something, and hopefully Switch 2 Joy-Cons were going to be discounted a little bit. Probably not, but you know, I was willing to hold out. But now it's like, no, like discounts are definitely not happening, and if anything, the prices are going to increase. So I was like, yeah, I'll just go ahead and buy that. So I have a Switch 2 Joy-Con on the way. But dang. Diggity dang. What is really surprising here is they said, hey, we don't intend on the Switch 2 going up anytime soon. And so this is what we already kind of knew is Nintendo was already they at one point had delayed pre-orders for the Switch because they didn't know what they were going to charge because of tariffs. If you remember, talked about it a while back on the podcast. And they eventually came out and was like, we're actually just going to keep the price the same. And what Nintendo did is they essentially, instead of kind of spreading out their inventory, basically flooded the U.S. and other countries wherever they wanted to sell, specifically the U.S., with inventory. And so that way, those particular units weren't tariffed because they were already in the country. So those units avoided the tax, avoided the tariff, whatever you want to call it. Here we have the Switch OLED at $400. This is kind of unprecedented. Because consoles never go up in price, or at least historically, right? I mean, like, you go back in time and you look and you'll see, like, GameCubes for, like, $50 on store shelves towards the end of their life cycle in, like, a Walmart. Insane. You know, like, it was... Normally, what happens is, as the time goes on, technology, like, in the console gets worse, and, you know, they'll make a PlayStation Pro, you know, PlayStation 4 Pro, PlayStation 5 Pro, or they'll have another console, you know, PlayStation 2 to PlayStation 3, whatever the case is. And then, you know, that other console is now cheaper to manufacture. It's now not a device people are finding as, you know, enticing because a newer, better version is out where all your games can go and so on and so forth. So there's no real reason to increase a price on a previous console version. That's not been the case. PlayStation has increased prices on their units, which is kind of crazy. And now we have Nintendo upping prices on their units to a point where the Switch OLED is $400. A Switch 2 base, not bundle, is $450. Why wouldn't you just get a Switch 2 at that point? There is no incentive to not just get a Switch 2. Shell out the extra $50 and get a Switch 2. And, you know, like, what that screams to me is if you want a Switch 2, you better get your hands on one. If you want to pay the current price, if you don't want to pay any higher for a Switch 2, one, I think Switch 2s are going to be harder to find at the end of the year. Not only do I think the inventory has been gone through at this point, like Nintendo definitely just flooded the market with supplies so they didn't have to deal with tariffs. But like now that units have probably sold through or have gotten closer to selling through, you're going to have way less inventory and now the price is going to go up. I think by the end of the year, you're likely going to see an increase on Switch 2. Who knows when? Could be early next year, maybe after the holidays, you know, they knock up the price, but Maybe tariffs change and we don't have to knock it up at all, but like the Switch 2 is 100% going to be increased in price. That's a certainty. And as long as the tariffs remain intact, it's 100% going to be knocked up in price, and I think it's going to be way harder to find. I think if you haven't gotten a Switch 2 yet, this is the alarm bell. You're either going to pay a higher price or going to have a harder time. One of the two if you don't get it soon. I think this is definitely worth talking about. I think this is probably going to happen to a lot of other sectors within the gaming industry. I wouldn't be surprised if you see other hardware go up in price. But yeah, an unfortunate reaction to, the world around us. Why can't we all just only care about video games? Why does other stuff have to happen, Just doesn't make any sense. Just, why can't everything be free, But that's it for the news. Thank you for sticking through that. That was kind of a rocky news segment. Some not very fun stories in there this week. But I think all of them are definitely important, and all of them are worth talking about. And, appreciate you sticking along. And now we'll get into some more interesting stuff. We'll get into the impressions. So, obviously, as of the past 2 weeks or so, I've been playing Donkey Kong Bananza. Banana. And it's fun, dude. It's a fun freaking game. I have admittedly not beaten it, but I am on the final boss. So normally I wouldn't have an issue beating a game like this in 2 weeks, but I've been playing it with my wife. It's been our kind of bonding time together. There is a co-op mode. You can play through the entire game co-op. Your partner plays as Pauline, and they basically just have the ability to throw, like random objects, like at anything in the environment pretty much whenever they want. And, it's very low stakes for her, and she's not a huge gamer, so she's able to, interact without having to always be involved and, like have a high skill level for her to do much. So, it's a great combo. I think it's at least a great combo. It allows us to play a lot of time, but it means that, it means that I am restricted to my time playing the game with her and when she's available. So I haven't been able to play it as often as I would have probably been able to, but still very close to the end of the game, gotten most of the bananas up to this point. So I do feel, even though I normally like to completely finish a game, I think I've definitely played enough at this point to give a stamp of a score or an approval or a disapproval or whatever. Because I've really engaged with the game, really engaged with its systems, and played it to the fullest, minus the final boss fight. And probably some in-game content as well, but we'll see. We'll see how much of that there is. But anyway, this game's pretty solid. It's from the team that made Odyssey. It is another Nintendo game, so very polished, very charming, and it's also something I really have to, pride it on is it's very unique. It's very innovative for a platformer. I should start by saying I am the platforming king. That is a self-appointed title. I play a lot of platformers. I consider it a genre that I really enjoy. And this is technically a platformer. I'm going to get into why I say technically in a little bit. But like the design for this game is amazing. Very well done. But as a hook, I'm going to try to reel you in here. It is slightly overpraised. This game is currently a 91 on Metacritic. Super Mario Odyssey, made by the same team and having a lot of similarities to this game, is a 97, which is insane. That game is definitely not a 97. Holy frick. Fun game, don't get me wrong, but like, game definitely is, that's so way too high. That's way too high. But anyway, it's a little overglazed. Just a little tiny, teeny bit. And we're going to get into why. I definitely had some issues with the game. And you probably don't hear about it very much because most people talking about this game are, at least that I hear talking about this game, are just like, it's the best game ever. Nintendo made it, and therefore it is so good. And listen, buddy, I am an objective critic. and I have opinions that are different than yours, and I don't let my nostalgia for Nintendo blind me because I had a Dreamcast as my first console, and so I don't have a blind Nintendo bias because I grew up playing Mario. So anyway, you play as Donkey Kong, the titular ape. Donkey Kong, and he's out and he's like, I like bananas, and that's pretty much the game, right? You're escorting Pauline. This mean monkey called Void Kong takes all the bananas and he tries to get to the center of the planet, which if you get to the center of the planet, you'll get one wish. And so Pauline, who you find wants to help you get to the center of the planet by turning you into like a monkey and a elephant and a zebra and all sorts of stuff, and she wants to get the frick out of here and go back home, and so she needs that wish, and you need those bananas, and so you team up to go after Void Kong. He's the evil one, and Cranky Kong is in the game, but not him, and you go after him and you find all the bananas, and it's essentially a collectathon. It's very similar to Odyssey, in which there's like a million freaking shines or moons or whatever you want to call them, and they're scattered amongst open areas, and you have to find them or collect them or do specific challenges in order to collect them all and move through the game. There's some, caveats to that, but we'll get into it as we go. So while this is a platformer, it does a lot to bunk the traditional systems that you'd expect from a platformer. So if you haven't heard, this game is all about breaking stuff. It is what is it? Dang it. Red Faction Guerrilla. Thank you. Oh my gosh. Sorry. Red Faction Guerrilla. If you don't know what Red Faction is, it is a game that was essentially or Red Faction Guerrilla specifically was a game that was based on its destruction engine where you could basically blow up anything. This is that. It's Red Faction Gorilla. With Donkey Kong being your gorilla. Get it? Haha. But essentially the entire game, all mechanics are built around Donkey Kong destroying the frick out of everything. Breaking levels, terrain, punching through walls, ripping up the ground and throwing it at enemies, climbing up most surfaces. Like, that's what you're kind of doing in the vast majority of this game. The kit that you have is pretty different than what you would expect. Like, I kind of walked into this game thinking it was going to be a really big, and I had not done a lot of research on this game prior because I knew I was going to love it, but I assumed it was going to be, because it was from the Mario Odyssey team, there was going to be a really detailed and intricate movement system to this game, and that is absolutely not the case. Like, moving around as DK is not very elegant. It's not very substantial to your experience here. I mean, most of the time you can just climb up a wall and just move a direction on the analog stick and you'll just go there. So and you don't have like a double jump or anything. Technically you can upgrade to get a double jump, but Donkey Kong does not have a double jump. Like, he just has a one single jump. So getting around as DK is not about movement. It's not about style like it would be in a Mario game, or pulling off really cool platforming sequences. Like, that's not what you're going to be doing here. You are breaking the frick out of stuff, and that's what the entire control scheme is based around. Like, all of the face buttons are just to destroy things, other than jump. You have a jump button, but every other button on the face is just to break things. You have a regular punch for forward breaking. You have a downward punch for breaking ground underneath you, and you have an upward punch for breaking stuff above you. And then your only other real thing you can do as DK is rip up the ground and throw it at people. So that's really all you're working with here. And that sounds simplistic, but they do a lot with it. That being said, it took me a long time to get used to these controls. And I have heard people complain about that. You can remap the controls if you really want to, but I wouldn't recommend it. It took me 4 or 5 hours to really sink in and get used to this game and its controls, because, and this is something I find fascinating within game design, but if you have ever thought about it, every game uses the same button for jump. Every game uses the same button for, select and back out and reload and so on and so forth. And there's a reason for that. And it's because you've been conditioned by every other game to play it like that. And if they did it on a different button, then you get frustrated. And that muscle memory that you have is, no longer there. And it's, that is just something that as a designer, you have to kind of capitulate to, is you don't really get to change the control schemes for a game that has, similar mechanics to others, because everybody's not going to know how to play the game. And it's very interesting. I remember watching a video from a designer a long time ago that was I studied my girlfriend playing video games for the first time, and things that were so obvious to me were because people, you'll probably play a game's tutorial and you'll be like, why are they making me play this tutorial? F this game. I know how to jump. I've played a million other games. I know how to jump. It's the same button. And he was like, well, yeah, she played this really simple 2D platformer, and it's she didn't know how to jump. She didn't know that you could break boxes because that's what you can do in every other game, and that a red barrel is explosive and stuff like that. It's just a really interesting thought experiment that we as hardcore gamers that play a lot of games probably don't think about very much. But that's something that's really intriguing to me. And in this case, this game's mechanics are so different and its control scheme is so different that somebody like me who's very well practiced, I suppose, at 3D platformers, I was really struggling with these controls for a while. I would mean to pick up and throw something, and I'd have to think about which button that was and how to do that and how to sequence that together in a platforming sequence so I wouldn't die and fall down a hole or whatever. There are drawbacks to being so different, right? And maybe there was a different control scheme they could have used, but I think I totally understand why they did what they did and why they mapped it the way they did. But it's just interesting that it's so difficult to adapt to that after decades of conditioning doing something different. But I do respect that the game takes a chance and tries something new in the platforming space, even though most players will likely have to adjust to this. And, it'll cause some growing pains. But, at the end of the day, I was okay with it. Destruction. Big deal here. Everybody talks about destruction. And let me tell you, it is satisfying. And the effort that goes into making you feel like you need to freaking break everything is admirable. There is a certain vibe to this game. And that vibe is you are the bull in the china shop. You are supposed to just destroy everything, and that's cool. If you fall from a really tall height, the ground will cave in underneath you, and if you pick up an item, it'll explode everything around you in the terrain. This game always wants to make you feel like you are just trying to blow everything up, and that's a huge part of the discussion of this game, is how great destruction feels, right? But let me just say, I see people talking about, oh, well, I was able to break the game and, just dig straight to objectives. And, I was just digging around for hours, and I didn't do anything but dig around and just destroy the entire world. I just spent hours doing that. Bro, I think this is highly exaggerated. Highly exaggerated. I enjoyed destroying terrain too. For about 10 to 15 minutes... when I first started up the game, for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then it lost all of its luster really quick when I realized there is not really a point to doing it at all. So this is, a compliment and an insult to the game in a way. The game is way too tightly designed to allow you to just burrow around everything and get all the collectibles and do all the objectives. There are barriers that are unbreakable around most things, most important things, like objectives, and the vast majority of collectibles, to be quite honest. Were there times that I just, punched through a wall that like, and I just like found a banana that I was like, oh, I definitely wasn't supposed to find it this way. Like there was a clear like path that I was supposed to take, that I was supposed to kind of understand, like that's how you're supposed to get that banana. Yes. Did I technically break the game like that? Sure. How many times did that happen? Maybe like 5 out of the 600 bananas I've collected throughout the campaign, like 5 of them. Like very rarely did I ever like break the game by doing that and stumbling through that. I also found that the incentive to digging pretty much like evaporates very quickly. So like the only incentive to digging is finding gold. And gold is so prevalent that, like, you will randomly come across it pretty easily. Like, it randomly spawns. Like, it's not like, oh, well, here's a random pocket of gold that you found that was already there. Like, no, like, you'll just punch through a wall, and it will just randomly spawn gold. Like, even when it's not, like, shown to be there in any way. So if you just beat the frick out of a wall enough, you will gain money. So it's like, okay, well, there's no real need to explore the terrain. Like, I'm not trying to find gold. It's really just mashing a button to beat the frick out of a wall. And, like, this is fun for, like, you know, like I said, 10 to 15 minutes. And then I'm like, okay, I really just need an objective. I really need a focus. I do not need to just beat the frick out of a hole for, like, 10 minutes, you know, like, or for hours, like I saw people talking about when this game originally came out. I think that is so highly exaggerated. I mean, if that's what you get your kicks from, I mean, go for it, bro. But like, that's like being like, yeah, dude, I just freaking dug straight down in Minecraft, and like that was the funnest thing I did all day. It's like, I mean, if that's what you love, okay, but I need a focus. I need a point to the madness. I need to know I'm doing something, which kind of leads into another small issue. This is pretty small about the game, which is the game's economy. It's pretty freaking worthless. Gold is used to buy, like, I don't know, entryway to challenges in some cases, bananas, basically, you know, normal stuff. This stuff is pretty cheap. I never at any point had any issue with money, ever. At the beginning of the game, I never had less than 10,000 gold, which is a lot, just in and of itself. And towards the end of the game, I never dipped below 20,000. And I was not attempting to farm gold or anything. Like, if I found gold, I would try to pick it up, but, like, that was pretty much it, you know? Another currency in the game that just feels completely underutilized is banana chips. They are all over the place, and they can be traded. Every 100 of them can be traded for a banana. You will likely never need to do this. I never felt the need to do this past when I figured out that's all you can use banana chips for. Where the real incentive to find stuff in the world is the fossils. Fossils are essentially just another form of currency. The problem with them is they are area specific. So each level has a specific kind of fossil, and you can trade that fossil at accessory vendors for, like, clothes that will give you a specific buff. And, like, that's something that was kind of hyped up in this prior to release, was like, oh no, dude, like, you can get buffs in this game, and, like, there's a skill tree. Isn't that freaking rad? And it's like, yeah, that is rad, and I really do appreciate that. But, like, in this instance, the perks are pretty, like, not useful for the most part. Like, I had the first tie I got access to, which that's one of the clothing items, because obviously DK doesn't wear very much. But, like, you get access to ties, and ties typically give you the better, like, long-lasting buffs. So it was like, oh, well, this tie will give you more treasure when you're digging through the area. And, like, treasure includes, like, locations to collectibles. So I found that to be the most valuable information being the most valuable. So I was like, I'll just keep this active. You know, everything else was like, you don't take as much damage or something like that. And I was like, I'm really not dying that much, so I really don't need that. I don't think I really died very much ever, actually. It was very, very, very rare for me to die from, like, damage. But these perks are pretty specific to the area you're in, and most of these perks, you know, like, you can only use this currency. One, you have to find all of them to fully buy out every store for each level. So you have to 100% the level in order to get everything maxed out. And then 2 is like, let's say like there's a level with poison in it. So if you touch the poison, you take damage. That's the only level that's going to have poison in it, okay? So there's maybe like an outfit that's like, well, you'll take 10% less damage from poison. Well, you only need it for that particular floor. You won't ever need that again because there's not poison anywhere else in the game. So like, it feels like you're investing in these items that are very minor upgrades to things that you won't really need for very long. So it just feels like it's a really underutilized system that could have been so much better. Like, I would have really appreciated something more like, oh, like this item gives you a double jump, or this item makes your, like your destructive capabilities more useful. Like maybe you punch a bigger hole in the wall or something like that. Like that could have been like a permanent thing I would have actually had to think about the trade-offs, where like I have no incentive to think about trade-offs in this game at all when I'm looking at stuff. It's like, well, this one is only going to be useful for this floor. Like I have no need for it any other time, so I should just equip it now and then change it when I get to the next level. When I'm able to buy the item that is useful for that floor, So while it's fun to have another thing to collect, it's ultimately like the incentive for finding it is a great one. It's just clearly like not something they wanted to fully delve into as a possibility. It's just like, yeah, sure, it does something. It kind of does something. Not the best thing ever, but it's better than other stuff. It's better than nothing. I mean, come on. We could have just given you nothing. It could have just been cosmetic, but we wanted to scratch your back a little bit. It's like, okay, cool, but like I feel like we're really only half doing it here, right? Bananas are the main source of collecting in the game. They're similar to shines or moons, I think, in Odyssey. These are a little less egregious than Mario. In Odyssey, like you would straight up like ground pound like a shining spot on the ground and you would get a freaking moon. And it was like, okay, cool. And it was like a spot like in the middle of like a path you were already walking. It was like ridiculous. Like there's a lot of moons like that in Mario. Admittedly, there are also just bananas just around in Donkey Kong, but I never felt like it was like, oh, we're kind of hiding it, like we're kind of making you work for it. It's like, no, like we realize this is just like you're exploring, here's a banana, and it's just like, okay, like I'll take that. In Mario it was like it really felt like they were ashamed of like having to put all these shines everywhere. But anyway, baseline point. The point is the bananas in Donkey Kong are all still pretty easy to frickin' get. Like, and that's where like the conversation around this game's difficulty comes in. Mario Odyssey is insanely difficult, especially collecting 90% of the shines in that game or the moons. Super easy. Literally don't even have to do something half the time. If you want to mainline this game, it's easy as balls. It is too easy. I did not mainline it. I tried to 100% every level because that's what me and my wife wanted to do before moving on, before moving on to the next level. But this game doesn't have barriers like, oh, well, you need 50 moons, like in Odyssey. It was like, well, you need X number of collectibles before you move on to the next level. This game doesn't do that. It's like you just need to get to the end of the level in order to move on. And yeah, like bananas are ultimately their way around that is like, well, the game's going to be a lot harder if you don't find the collectibles because then you're not going to have the skills to increase your health and, like do extra stuff in combat that's going to make boss fights harder and stuff like that. Bro, I never had that issue. Admittedly, I was 100%ing it all the way to the end of the game. So, like, I had my skills pretty much as maxed out as they could possibly be for most of the game. But, like, if you just want to get to the end of this game, I mean, you can do it so easy. So easy. You can bypass 90% of what this game's content is and just run straight to the end of the game, and it'll be easy as balls. If you want to 100% it, there are some challenges that you will encounter towards the end of the game specifically that will make you work for it, okay? There are some things in this game that are harder. But again, if you just want to base like mainline this game, I would hardly even say you're playing it. Like, it's like not even worth playing at that point. Like, you really have to engage in the side content and exploring the levels and all that other stuff in order for this game to even be worth playing, in my opinion. That's how easy it would be to just get to the end of the game. But this game is never going to make you pull your hair out or anything, even with taking those more challenging, side missions or whatever collectibles into consideration. Game constantly gives you new ways to interact. We'll move on to some more positive things here. Game constantly gives you a new way to interact with the world, since there's so many different materials in the world, and some of those even like interact and play off of each other. I mean, you have like at some point in the game you get access to a material that like lifts you way up into the sky. There's obviously, like I mentioned earlier, poison that hurts when it touches you, and then like later in the game there's like salt that melts slime. Specifically, there's like slug enemies that are like invincible unless you're otherwise throwing salt at them. So it's always adding a new element that you have to kind of learn how to interact with. And like even with like a kit like Donkey Kong's, you really have to know how to utilize it and think about how you're interacting with the world, so you're not just able to always bulldoze through stuff, kind of like I was saying. You're not always able to do that. In fact, most of the time you're not. Like, there is design that is intended for all of this stuff. You're also going to get access to alternate forms. These are, temporary transformations that give you different abilities. There's like a bird one that lets you fly a little bit, because DK doesn't have a lot of aerial maneuverability. You have a zebra that lets you run faster, an elephant that lets you suck up materials, and so on and so forth. These are cool, but I tried not to really use them very much, unless it was like a challenge that was specifically designed for that particular transformation. Because let's be real, like, one, these transformations made things easier, and I already thought the game was way too easy. And two, most things were intentionally designed with DK as the main method of like getting through these challenges. So like it was, and I'll get into it a little bit, but if you really wanted to, you could F up how a challenge was done. Because like, let's say you switched to an elephant and you sucked up all the terrain around you, then it made it impossible for you to like climb an area. Because now there's like no climbable walls anymore because you sucked it all up. And it's like, oh, frick. Like I shouldn't have used elephant here because it just completely destroyed this challenge for me. So like using DK was as a default when the game wasn't trying to force me to use it was like kind of what I felt the need I had to do. There are a few other small pain points that I noticed. Like sometimes it's frustrating getting out of holes that you've dug. Especially when I was playing with my wife, she would sometimes like throw out like one of her little projectiles, and like sometimes you can just dig straight down and like you can just immediately climb back up, straight back up, and it's not like a problem. But if like my wife did something to mess up the trajectory, it was like always a problem trying to get back up out of the hole, because now it wasn't just a straight flat path to get back up. That happened in a few other scenarios as well, like climbing. Sometimes like the camera would be wonky, and like because again, like you're climbing all over the dang place, you're a freaking monkey. So like sometimes the camera would be inverted and like the analog stick wouldn't convert to which way I'm actually looking, that kind of stuff. I'd say the game, I was admittedly 100%ing it. I'll preface it with this, but I do think the game slightly overstays its welcome. I'd say about 3/4 of the way through the game, I started being like, dang, there's another freaking level. And there ended up, the first time I thought that, I think there were like 3 other levels. So like, like it was like, oh, frick. Like I expected this game to be over by now. Like we're still going, frick. Like, dang, this game keeps on keeping on. Like which like there's no problem with having too much content if it's good content, and I think it is. But like I do wish that the game probably wrapped up a little bit earlier. But at the end of the day, overall, the game's levels are all fun. They're often inventive. They go into some crazy freaking places that I was not expecting when I first started this game. The game is clearly just trying to have fun. And what's better is it succeeds at that. This is a game that, the design is often very good based on the tools and constrictions that it gives the player. There's 100% that Nintendo charm and polish throughout the game, and it's meaty and satisfying from beginning to end. Like there is sure, there's complaints here, but like I really can't fault a game for trying something new. And I think it kind of leads to the question of like, which game do I like more from this team, like Mario Odyssey or this one, DK? Obviously, Mario Odyssey is reviewed higher, but I think that game is vastly over-reviewed. I think that game is still a great game. Obviously, a classic. People are always going to look back on. Kids are going to love that for time immemorial. But there's still definitely flaws with it. Like I said, way too easy. But like, I think both have different strengths is the thing here. They're both different games. And like, probably for me, I'd say I enjoyed Mario more. But why? Obviously, it's just what I'm looking for. Like, as a dude who really likes platformers, DK is by definition a platformer, but it really doesn't have a lot of traditional platforming in it, like Mario Odyssey does. And it, like I love great movement in a platformer, and DK does not have great movement, but he's not designed to. That is not the point of Donkey Kong Bonanza. Mario Odyssey, like, that is every single button on the controller is for running around and jumping around and, like being agile. And that's not what every button on the controller for DK is. It's for breaking things, which is the point of the game. So, like, I think this game sets out and it succeeds at what it tries to do, and I think it makes it fun. And I think, like kind of like Splatoon, it's innovative, it's different, it's trying to take a spin on something that is already there, and I really respect it for that. I don't give out 9s very often, but I'd say this is easily like a 9 game from me, and, it's a 91 on Metacritic right now, which I think is like just a tad high, like just a tad. I think 90 is good, though. I think 90 is right where it deserves to be, and I'm really glad I'm playing it / got to play it, like I had a lot of fun with it, and I'm really looking to see, like, I already know that whatever the ending for this game is going to be some really fun, climactic, probably music-filled, epic ending. And there's probably going to be a lot of extra content after I'm done playing the game, and there's going to be hours of content for me and my wife to go through and have a great time with. And I'm looking forward to that. I'm genuinely looking forward to that. So, I really can't recommend Donkey Kong enough. Now, admittedly, if you're looking for a Mario, I don't think this is that, but it is a fun game. It is a great, fun game, and I definitely recommend it. So, that's my opinion on Donkey Kong Bonanza. I don't think I glazed it that much. Like I came out at the end, I gave it a 9. I feel like I'm a lot more pessimistic around games than most. I try to be pretty objective. And I think most of the time you see people, I don't know why. I have a friend that he's very active on social media. He's actually kind of a semi-influencer in a way. He tries to do it actually as a part-time job. And he's super big in Nintendo. And he does everything he can to get those clicks, you know what I'm saying? And he's very generous. We'll say generous to Nintendo. And, like he's all about, he's like, this is game of the year, Donkey Kong Bonanza. And I'm like, I don't know. I'd still say that Clair Obscur is my game of the year. If I had to pick one, I think I'd easily lean towards Clair Obscur, but it gives me some more moments that I appreciate more. But like Donkey Kong, I mean, this is easily top 5. I'd say easily top 3. I'd say I'd be surprised if Donkey Kong doesn't make it in the top 3 at the end of the year. We still have a lot of really great games coming out. Holy frick, October, buckle up, Buttercup. That is going to be a crazy month. But like, we have a lot of great games that are still on the docket for the rest of the year, and I still think that Donkey Kong has a super strong possibility of staying in the top 3, no doubt. So, I think, Donkey Kong Bonanza, really great start to the Switch 2's life. We'll see if Nintendo continues. I don't think Mario Kart World was. I think Mario Kart World is easily the lesser game of the two for the Nintendo Switch 2's launch cycle life. But highly recommend it. Again, just know what you're getting into. If you're looking for a Mario, it's not a Mario, but still think it's super fun. You should give it a try. So, that wraps it up for this week, or this bi-monthly, this other weekly, every other week, I'll figure it out. Podcast. Thank you for tuning in to the Plug in Play podcast, friends. If you made it to the end here, obviously I appreciate you. I hope you enjoyed the opinions on Bananza. Obviously a big topic recently. I'm sorry it took me a little while to get those out. I know the internet likes to move on pretty quick, but I want to be sure. I really do try to give full opinions when I give them. I don't like to give half opinions, like, oh, well, maybe the game falls apart in the second half, or something like, oh, I played the tutorial and it seemed okay. I don't want to kind of come out and tell you something that isn't fully true. I want to make sure I'm right. And sure, I didn't beat the final boss, but I intend to, and I don't think much is going to change from now until the end of the boss. So, I think I'm fully capable of speaking to it. Obviously, the news was a bit of an interesting bag this week. Hopefully you enjoyed the discussion there. Hopefully it wasn't too off-putting. Again, I think I try to talk about the important stuff. I try to tell it in a nice, fun way, story, give some insider info, maybe some personal opinion. Maybe I did a little too much today, but I hope it wasn't too much. Write me an email at the plugandplaypodcast@1@gmail.com, and in the description if you couldn't hear that. And tell me how wrong my political beliefs are, even though I didn't try to talk about them that much. And we'll have a good old debate. We'll turn it into a political debating podcast. Holy frick. Yeah, I don't want that. I would probably not do very well at that. But anyway, it's not a video game. I can't talk about it. It's not a video game, I don't know how to talk about it. But anyway, I appreciate you, friend. And I appreciate you allowing me to have this conversation with you. And I hope you play some good video games coming up. And I hope you get to listen to me next time. I hope I'm here next time. Well, I guess I'd be the only one. I don't even know why I said that. There's nobody else who could be here. But I hope there's another episode where I get to talk to you. That's what I meant to say. So have a good one, sir. Or madam. We don't discriminate here. And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.